support their families. Number 3, clear outstanding bills to the media and other suppliers by 30th June 2020, that's the end of this month. This will help struggling businesses. Currently the media, and I'm sure some of our members here, the media is owed to a tune of over 15 billion shillings. That's spending and advertising and communication bills for government and government agencies. If cleared, this would go a long way in keeping the media houses and other businesses alive and afloat to continue communicating. Number 4, the price of fuel has a huge impact on prices of goods and services. A big part of this is tax, the fuel levy. Government should consider either some fuel subsidies or reducing the tax on fuel and insisting this reflects on the pump prices. Number 5, in similar vein, the government urgently needs to renegotiate with the energy producing companies and ensure the price of electricity goes down by at least 20%. Whereas electricity distribution has increased, electricity generation and distribution has increased, most people use it just for lighting. It remains very expensive. A reduction will instantly spur local industry, support farmers in preservation of their produce, increase value addition, and save the environment, so that we don't have the floating island coming for us. Government has promised to capitalize UDB, and His Excellency the President repeated that yesterday in his State of Nation address as an effort to support local industry. This is very commendable. We pray for an additional budget that will be dispersed through the circles and SMEs at the village level, sending money to the circles, which are widespread, and at very substantial very minimal interest rate, like 5%, would be a shot in the arm for many people, many entrepreneurs who are hustling, trying to set up after losing their jobs. Number 6, the cost of money remains a big hindrance to access of capital. The lowering of the CBR by the central bank hasn't necessarily reflected onto the bank's lending rate. Much as the CBR now is on single digits, banks still charge interest rates as about 20%. And this has put a strain on businesses which can't borrow at such high rates in a sustainable way. Promoting BUBU, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, we applaud Parliament once again for that, and then the local content bill. We believe the country has the capacity to produce most of the goods and services we need. Young industries need to be protected from dumping and allowing tax waivers for new manufacturers in particular sectors, while maybe considering a bit of high taxes on the cheap imports which they are being dumped on our market. This one has worked, and if you visit the ceramic industry, the conversation is different because of the goodwill ties which are coming from Nakasongora. We believe the same can be done for agricultural products and other sectors, and that will have a huge impact on the economy. For the media, many are struggling and finding it difficult to pay license fees. We request that you waive license fees for the broadcasters payable to UCC for at least 3 years. That will help media houses to stay alive. It may sound like a very small amount of money, but it makes a big difference. We also request that UBC and Signet, UBC, the national broadcaster, and Signet, the signal carrier, waive the signal carrier fees for 6 months to enable us to keep transmitting the important information with less hindrances and not focusing on the costs. A lot of advertising is now going towards international content distributors such as Google, YouTube, Facebook, and others. These take away the dollars that would have come in to support small companies as well as the big ones without paying tax. This has eaten into the advertising revenue for media houses. Back in the days when we were growing up and starting in the industry, there used to be a segment called Matarisi on Radio Uganda, and later it was adopted as classifieds on these commercial radios, but they have all gone, and the people who used to advertise there, they are now advertising on Facebook, and Google is picking up that revenue. But they don't pay taxes here from the last time I checked. So we need them to pay taxes, or we get a way of how to get that revenue channeled back into to support the broadcasting and other media houses. Online communication is becoming the preferred channel of reaching everyone. Most of the vital information on COVID is being consumed on social media and WhatsApp. However, stuck with the decision of whether to buy food or OTT, many poor citizens will choose the former. In these times of COVID, we need everyone to access information across all platforms unhindered. We pray that we consider suspending the OTT tax, so at least for a year, so that you can make everybody afford and access that communication. We'd like also to suggest that every government program should have at least a 2 to 5% budget component towards sensitization and awareness, and this should be dedicated towards buying media across all platforms. That's newspapers, TV, radio, online, among others, for communicating the new normal. And lastly, Madam Chair, paying taxes is going to be hard for most businesses. Yesterday, the State of the Nation, His Excellency touched on it, but we pray that it's put into practice, that URA puts in place policy measures to allow and go into forfeiting penalties and interests on tax for anything for some time. This will excite defaulters to clear the outstanding bills and enable increased tax collection while reducing the burden on small to medium business. We are talking about money and asking for money, but where will it come from? In our limited understanding of the economy, this is where we think that some of this money can come from. The budget already had big travel and per diem for civil servants. There was also a budget for conferences and seminars. Most of these haven't happened in the last quarter and might not happen until the end of the financial year. This is a big saving, and this will help avail some money to some of these proposals. Secondly, we propose that we put a hold to new infrastructure projects. For example, we are already producing more power than we can consume. We have a fairly good road infrastructure. So if we suspended investment in the infrastructure programs and money is used to stabilize other sectors of the economy first, this will help. As the President has mentioned before, this is war situation. It's war times. We need to think as soldiers on the front line. And some sacrifices definitely need to be made for the battle to be won. Number 3, tax the international content distributors, such as Google, YouTube, Facebook. And finally, we heard that there are some grants and donations which are never fully utilized. Maybe this is the time to look at them and make sure every coin is put to utilization. We'd like to thank you very much for your invitation once again and look forward to seeing some of our proposals adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a very good presentation. No wonder you inform, confuse, and educate. You have analyzed the issues very well, and the stimuli is superb. But I think there is one thing you left out. The cost of internet. These days I've been attending virtual conferences that before you are done, it's finished. And it doesn't cost so little. So I expected you to talk about this, since most of now your reporting is via the internet. I think this is an omission which we need to address. On a serious note, I want to thank you for informing and educating the public, because we have never had such a successful campaign like the COVID-19. I think that is a plus for you. And that the President has never had the kind of audiences he has been having on his presidential addresses. The 15 of them, he's been getting almost all the 40 million people listening to him wherever they are. I think that is really a commendable job. And I think for you've been more nationalistic in your reporting. I wouldn't say for the first time, but on one of the few occasions. And really that's what we need. I remember when America was attacked by the, you remember, was it, yes. CNN put out all the advertisements and all their medias, and they were talking one thing. Before every program, the first message would be America under attack. But you have been nationalistic in reporting, and I pray that you continue with that. I know the confusing period is coming ahead of us, but we could learn from this experience and report in a more educative way. Now, the new normal, things have changed. For me, I used to enjoy going to the market with my basket. But having tested the online shopping, I don't think I'll go to the market again. Suffer that those their experiences in the markets. I don't think I'll go back. And I realized that even buying general merchandise is cheaper online than going to the shops. So at least there have been some silver lining which has been discovered around the gray clouds. And that means that the new normal is going to be different. How equipped are you to cope with the new normal? That's the challenge. We've talked about the stimuli here which you want. It is all welcome, and most of it cuts across the entire economic sector. I don't see anything which is peculiar to you. The capitalization of UDB, and some of this government is already handling. You talked about the social assistance grants. Government has been implementing this, but for the older persons. But if you are you want this to be extended directly to everybody, to the vulnerable groups, I don't think it will be tenable. Government may not be able to afford it. Already here in Parliament this year we are going to return a lot of money to government because we have not traveled, we have not had the seminars for almost half of the session. So that is certainly a saving. But the problem is, while government is making savings out of those, there are new challenges coming up. The preparedness for COVID is a big toll on our budget. So really, these savings might not go into cover all the areas we anticipate because of the new challenges and the associated costs with those new challenges. But to me, your analysis of the effects and the stimuli, I think are very, very welcome. Having said that, I would like to invite my colleagues to make their comments. I don't know whether you would like to have the UCC, the regulator, also comment before we proceed. Okay. Madam Acting Executive Director, first of all, I want to congratulate you. Though it is, we are not yet sure, but you count a few days. Because Vinaisa said, Entebbe Woma. The few days, even if they are few, at least you are worth a congratulation for being there. You are welcome. Yeah. Vice Chair, please make sure that you maintain that social distance. I see that you are getting tempted to reduce on it. Please maintain it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the honourable members for inviting the UCC team that I am leading, and thank you to the members of NAB for the presentation back. We had a presentation that we had also prepared upon the invitation of the committee, and as I address that, I'll also speak to some of the issues that have been raised. Apologies that we did not send it prior as requested, but other copies will be provided shortly. In terms of the background, we note, all of us are aware of the effects that resulted due to the COVID pandemic that broke out globally, and resultantly the need of government to take actions in terms of instituting the lockdown. And from where we were seated, we noted that there was a decline in economic activity, especially for sectors that rely on physical contact between consumers and service providers. There was a decline in the access to public services, especially those that were not yet digitized. There was limited access to markets and consumers. This affected both the supply side and the demand side. An interruption, of course, in the various supply chains, whether it was business to business or business to customer. Looking specifically at the communications sector that we oversee, I'll take a moment to bring into context what the communication sector comprises. Today we have the media group. However, we oversee the telecommunications, broadcasting as has been presented. We also oversee postal and courier, data communications that Madam Chair, you just spoke about, communication infrastructure, which we eagerly had an interesting comment from the NAB group, and we also have a context in terms of audiovisual and cinematography, although to a much limited context. When we look at the business activity in the sector during this COVID lockdown period, all the business operations in the various sub-industries were focusing on ensuring continuity of the services, having been recognized as essential services by the President within the restrictions. They were also working to make sure we have maintenance and continued improvement while adhering with the curfew measures. Those were also alluded to by the National Association of Broadcasters. Customer contact centers were key because persons needed support. And of course, as has already been mentioned, significant dissemination of communications messages and directives as guided by government. We had this from the broadcasting industry as well as the telecommunication providers were also instrumental in this. We also had introduction of self-help channels, again to improve responsiveness on online platforms to the consumers, and had continued engagement with us as the regulator to make sure we have issues of compliance and competition issues continue to be addressed. In the case of the courier segment, Madam Chair was very glad to hear you speak to the appreciation of delivery services, which we see as a new normal. And this required, of course, our courier segment to step up their efforts to make sure that last mile deliveries are also done. As has been mentioned by the NAB, working with skeleton staff became the norm to also various operators, as of course the authorization granted was limited, and in the bid to ensure safety of the workers working at home, the work from home measures also had to be implemented within the sector. In terms of the trends in demand for communication services, yes, demand for broadcasting services remained unchanged, or more like it increased because everybody was curious for information and also had more time on their hands. We also saw an increase in reliance on broadcast services and infrastructure for mass communication and education or sensitization of the public, increased consumption of data services, largely supported by the increased utilization and consumption of online services. So COVID did bring a plus in terms of appreciation of the ICTs and the various opportunities they present. We have already mentioned the last mile courier in terms of delivery services, and there was also an increase in utilization of digital financial services. All in all, we saw that COVID drove an appreciation of why we need communication services in the economy. In terms of revenues, Madam Chair, the invitation extended to UCC asked us to depend on evidence-based information So what we have is really for the telecom revenues, where we have information. We continue to await our broadcasters to be able to share with us some of this information that helps us analyze and appreciate the challenges they have. In the absence of such information, we can only take it as hearsay. So in the case of the telecom revenues, voice declined. Mobile revenue, of course, also declined as a result, but data increased by 9%. The voice declined by 26%. The other trends that I can share, there was a 31% decline in voice traffic across the network, 6% decline on on-net traffic, that's traffic within the same network, 21% decline in the one network area outbound traffic, so we were communicating less to our neighbors, 17% decline in inbound international telecom traffic. This was mainly because most people moved to the data platform, and 13% decline also in the outbound traffic, again because more people use the data platforms to do their calling these days. In terms of the prices in the sector, the operators discounted to encourage usage of these services, but also in a bid to support the necessities of the communication services to the public in the period. So with voice, there was a 75% discount on on-net, and those, of course, were limited promotions. And data as well had discounts they are provided, but again, limited promotions that were, for example, done the work from home that was only available from 9 to 5 p.m. every day. Other interventions that were undertaken, there was zero rating of critical content of government, such as education. Some education sites were zero rated, including the health information website. There was waivers on mobile money transactions. That was only those limited within the network. For many people, there was always the question of when I transfer to another network, I'm charged. That was not zero waived of fees. Bundled offers, I've already spoken to the broadband services that had promotions. And in the case of the broadcasters, they accepted when we contacted them and were communicating the various advisories from government on COVID free of charge. There was also an introduction of the toll-free number for health services, which wasn't in place. So calls to the 911 were free from all networks. What we noted in terms of the financial and liquidity position, again, this is mainly with respect to the telecom, because as I mentioned, that is where we have evidence. We noticed a decline in business activity in some of the revenue streams, continued challenges with debt serving. This cuts more across the various sectors, as we saw also and heard from the NAB. Continued need to meet regulatory benchmarks, such as VAT, excise, and income taxes, and increased requests for payment extensions from debtors, again across the economy, and that was not unique to the communications sector. There was also pressure on realizing cash flows. NAB has already shared the decline in advertising, because when institutions or many of the corporations were adhering to the lockdown, they also, in many cases, put a freeze on their expenditures and paying out due to the uncertainties on how long that would be, and in some cases, the challenges of ensuring the processes are adequately followed. We hope, though, that now that those, many of them are back to work, we'll see a flow back in terms of some of that payment. Our mid-term outlook of the communications sector, we believe right now it's still too early for us. We are continuing to collect information from the various parties to help us analyze and appreciate exactly the level of shock to the communications sector and what the new normal means in terms of the communication sector. However, what we anticipate, based on what we have seen around the place, is that yes, there's going to be a decline in business activity for some of the revenue streams. There was mention by the broadcasters about advertising. We've seen that this is a global issue with all advertising, and in many cases there is a call to revisit the business models that traditionally depend on advertising. So we are all being called upon to press a restart and design our operations based on this new normal. We see restructuring as a very likely issue in terms of staffing levels. Yes, many have been mentioning the observation of the continuity that they have managed to achieve with the skeleton staff, but also because of the revenues that are right now, we expect that we're going to have a trough in revenue flow that is going to cause many people to first put a freeze on recruitments and also most likely suspend some contracts. We also anticipate that having tested the benefits of ICTs, we're going to see a greater integration of ICTs in critical service delivery and also private sector operations. We are currently as a commission critically driving the adoption of these to improve the positioning of many businesses. Madam Chair, I'll move on to the opportunities that are rising from the pandemic. We see innovative service delivery mechanisms coming up. Of course, already the ICT sector was offering a number of opportunities that we continue to say let us look at in our local context and make sure that we absorb them as they speak to us to help us with our local challenges. And we are seeing many of our people coming up with very innovative ways of restarting their operations, but also improving their livelihood. We see development of collaborative and shared workspaces, having discovered all these online tools, increased reliance on e-services, becoming a reality in both government and private sector. Digital financial services are going to be again critical. Implementation of e-services we have mentioned, increased R&D and innovation, and convergence of traditional broadcasting to deliver content. Recently we saw that telcos now also have some TV apps that traditionally have only been limited to the broadcasting sector. So in terms of short-term strategies that we see, we note people will need to adopt innovative working methods, as we have mentioned. We also note a need to reinvent ourselves in terms of the new normal, revisit the traditional ways of doing business, and identify the current or what will be possible in the new normal, especially in appreciation of the new digital world that we are in. It's not going away. Partnering with key sectors for digitization and broadcasting of local content. For example, the educational lessons that have been mentioned, and also a lot of the content we've always argued that the broadcasters have would be very key in terms of digitalizing it and making it available. I keep telling people I miss the Guelph Solo content and keep hoping that one day I'll see that content again. Provision of attractive offers and rate reductions to stimulate demand, as has been presented. Zero rating of key websites. We hope the sector will also appreciate and accept to do this. And request for repayment plans and debt restructuring is going to be a common aspect in this period. I will comment on some of the proposals just shortly. Limiting new commitments, especially capital expenditures by organizations, and reprioritizing the business plan. For the medium and long-term strategies, we are proposing review of business and service delivery models, increased R&D to new product lines and services, enhanced partnerships with key stakeholders providing access to new markets, sharing of infrastructure and platforms to reduce operational costs, This is especially key in our infrastructure-heavy industries like telecom and also broadcasting have this. Harnessing of new opportunities, the data-driven services, and collaborative regulation across government. In terms of the interventions we have made as a commission, I will share with you some that we have already completed and others are in the pipeline, so we'll be communicating those subsequently. We have partnered with the private sector to address the current and future risks associated with the slowdown in economy. We want to hear with them and sit and understand what are the challenges ahead of all of us, because when they don't operate, we are also not operating. We want to improve our quick turnaround time for decision making so that we are making sure we are responsive to the needs of the sector. Supporting R&D and innovation by the public sector, especially in terms of providing common platforms and inputs, and facilitating, during the COVID, we were active, we did handle the broadcasting team, which was handled by our colleagues from Media Council. We facilitated mobility of operators designated as essential to ensure continuity of services, and coordinated with the private sector to address critical threats to communication infrastructure. I'm sorry for the long time we were seated. We noted that there was a decline in economic activity, especially for sectors that rely on physical contact between consumers and service providers. There was decline in the access to public services, especially those that were not yet digitized. There was limited access to markets and consumers. This affected both the supply side and the demand side. An interruption, of course, in the various supply chains, whether it was business to business or business to customer. Looking specifically at the communication sector that we oversee, I'll take a moment to bring into context what the communication sector comprises. Today we have the media group. However, we oversee the telecommunications, broadcasting as has been presented. We also oversee postal and courier, data communications that Madam Chair, you just spoke about, communication infrastructure, which we eagerly had an interesting comment from the NAB group, and we also have a context in terms of audiovisual and cinematography, although to a much limited context. When we look at the business activity in the sector during this COVID lockdown period, all the business operations in the various sub-industries were focusing on ensuring continuity of the services, having been recognized as essential services by the President within the restrictions. They were also working to make sure we have maintenance and continued improvement while adhering with the curfew measures. Those were also alluded to by the National Association of Broadcasters. Customer contact centers were key because persons needed support. And of course, as has already been mentioned, significant dissemination of communications messages and directives as guided by government. We had this from the broadcasting industry as well as the telecommunication providers were also instrumental in this. We also had introduction of self-help channels, again to improve responsiveness on online platforms to the consumers, and had continued engagement with us as the regulator to make sure we have issues of compliance and competition issues continue to be addressed. In the case of the courier segment, Madam Chair was very glad to hear you speak to the appreciation of delivery services, which we see as a new normal. And this required, of course, our courier segment to step up their efforts to make sure that last mile deliveries are also done. As has been mentioned by the NAB, working with skeleton staff became the norm to also various operators, as of course the authorization granted was limited, and in the bid to ensure safety of the workers, working at home, the work from home measures also had to be implemented within the sector. In terms of the trends in demand for communication services, yes, demand for broadcasting services remained unchanged, or more like it increased because everybody was curious for information and also had more time on their hands. We also saw an increase in reliance on broadcast services and infrastructure for mass communication and education or sensitization of the public, increased consumption of data services, largely supported by the increased utilization and consumption of online services. So COVID did bring a plus in terms of appreciation of the ICTs and the various opportunities they present. We have already mentioned the last mile courier in terms of delivery services, and there was also an increase in utilization of digital financial services. All in all, we saw that COVID drove an appreciation of why we need communication services in the economy. In terms of revenues, Madam Chair, the invitation extended to UCC asked us to depend on evidence-based information. So what we have is really for the telecoms revenues where we have information. We continue to await our broadcasters to be able to share with us some of this information that helps us analyze and appreciate the challenges they have. In the absence of such information, we can only take it as hearsay. So in the case of the telecom revenues, voice declined. Mobile revenue, of course, also declined as a result, but data increased by 9%. The voice declined by 26%. The other trends that I can share, there was a 31% decline in voice traffic across the networks, 6% decline on on-net traffic, that's traffic within the same network, 21% decline in the one network area outbound traffic, so we were communicating less to our neighbors, 17% decline in inbound international telecom traffic. This was mainly because most people moved to the data platforms, and 13% decline also in the outbound traffic, again because more people use the data platforms to do their calling these days. In terms of the prices in the sector, the operators discounted to encourage usage of these services, but also in a bid to support the necessities of the communication services to the public in the period. So with voice, there was a 75% discount on on-net, and those, of course, were limited promotions. And data as well had discounts there provided, but again, limited promotions that were, for example, done the work from home that was only available from 9 to 5 p.m. every day. Other interventions that were undertaken, there was zero rating of critical content of government, such as education. Some educational sites were zero rated, as well as the health information website. There was waivers on mobile money transactions. That was only those limited within the network. For many people, there was always the question of when I transfer to another network, I'm charged. That was not waived of fees. Bundled offers, I've already spoken to the broadband services that had promotions. And in the case of the broadcasters, they accepted when we contacted them and were communicating the various advisories from government on COVID free of charge. There was also an introduction of the toll-free number for health services, which wasn't in place. So calls to the 911 were free from all networks. What we noted in terms of the financial and liquidity position, again, this is mainly with respect to the telecom, because as I mentioned, that is where we have evidence. We noticed a decline in business activity in some of the revenue streams. Continued challenges with debt serving. This cuts more across the various sectors, as we saw also and heard from the NAB. Continued need to meet regulatory benchmarks, such as VAT, excise, and income taxes, and increased requests for payment extensions from debtors, again across the economy, and that was not unique to the communications sector. There was also pressure on realizing cash flows. NAB has already shared the decline in advertising, because when institutions or many of the corporations were adhering to the lockdown, they also, in many cases, put a freeze on their expenditures and paying out due to the uncertainties on how long that would be, and in some cases, the challenges of ensuring the processes are adequately followed. We hope, though, that now that those, many of them are back to work, we'll see a flow back in terms of some of that payments. Our mid-term outlook of the communications sector, we believe right now it's still too early for us. We are continuing to collect information from the various parties to help us analyze and appreciate exactly the level of shock to the communications sector and what the new normal means in terms of the communications sector. However, what we anticipate, based on what we have seen around the place, is that yes, there's going to be a decline in business activity for some of the revenue streams. There was mention by the broadcasters about advertising. We've seen that this is a global issue with all advertising, and in many cases, there's a call to revisit the business models that traditionally depend on advertising. So we are all being called upon to press a restart and design our operations based on this new normal. We see restructuring as a very likely issue in terms of staffing levels. Yes, many have been mentioning the observation of the continuity that they have managed to achieve with the skeleton staff, but also because of the revenues that are right now, we expect that we're going to have a trough in revenue flow that is going to cause many people to first put a freeze on recruitments and also most likely suspend some contracts. We also anticipate that, having tested the benefits of ICTs, we're going to see a greater integration of ICTs in critical service delivery and also private sector operations. We are currently, as a commission, critically driving the adoption of these to improve the positioning of many businesses. Madam Chair, I'll move on to the opportunities that are rising from the pandemic. We see innovative service delivery mechanisms coming up. Of course, already the ICT sector was offering a number of opportunities that we continue to say, let us look at in our local context and make sure that we absorb them as they speak to us to help us with our local challenges. And we are seeing many of our people coming up with very innovative ways of restarting their operations, but also improving their livelihood. We see development of collaborative and shared workspaces, having discovered all these online tools, increased reliance on e-services, becoming a reality in both government and private sector. Digital financial services are going to be, again, critical. Implementation of e-services we have mentioned, increased R&D and innovation, and convergence of traditional broadcasting to deliver content. Recently, we saw the telcos now also have some TV apps that traditionally would have only been limited to the broadcasting sector. So in terms of short-term strategies that we see, we note people will need to adopt innovative working methods, as we have mentioned. We also note a need to reinvent ourselves in terms of the new normal, revisit the traditional ways of doing business, and identify the current or what will be possible in the new normal, especially in appreciation of the new digital world that we are in. It's not going away. Partnering with key sectors for digitization and broadcasting of local content. For example, the education lessons that have been mentioned, and also
a lot of the content we've always argued that the broadcasters have would be very key in terms of digitalizing it and making it available. I keep telling people I miss the Bwavu Musolo content and keep hoping that one day I'll see that content again. Provision of attractive offers and rate reductions to stimulate demand, as has been presented. Zero rating of key websites. We hope the sector will also appreciate and accept to do this. And requests for repayment plans and debt restructuring is going to be a common aspect in this period. I will comment on some of the proposals just shortly. Limiting new commitments, especially capital expenditures by organizations, and reprioritizing the business plans. For the medium and long-term strategies, we are proposing review of business and service delivery models, increased R&D to new product lines and services, enhanced partnerships with key stakeholders providing access to new markets, sharing of infrastructure and platforms to reduce operational costs. This is especially key in our infrastructure-heavy industries like telecom and also broadcasting have this. Harnessing of new opportunities, the data-driven services, and collaborative regulation across government. In terms of the interventions we have made as a commission, I will share with you some that we have already completed and others are in the pipeline, so we'll be communicating those subsequently. We have partnered with the private sector to address the current and future risks associated with the slowdown in economy. We want to hear with them and sit and understand what are the challenges ahead of all of us, because when they don't operate, we are also not operating. We want to improve our quick turnaround time for decision making so that we are making sure we are responsive to the needs of the sector. Supporting R&D and innovation by the public sector, especially in terms of providing common platforms and inputs, and facilitating, during the COVID, we were active. We didn't handle the broadcasting team, which was handled by our colleagues from Media Council, but we facilitated mobility of operators designated as essential to ensure continuity of services, and coordinated with the private sector to address and critical threats to communication infrastructure. I'm sorry for the long presentation, but I'm nearly ending. Long-term policy considerations. We note there is going to be a need to enhance digital literacy to spur demand of e-services. Policy support towards increase in access to ICTs is required. Development of digital identity to support the delivery of e-services. Reducing the cost of investment through rollout of critical support services, for example, conduits along the road network and electricity network, and also review of the policy and regulatory frameworks to make them more responsive, for example, the taxation policy. Proposals and recommendations we would like to put to your committee for consideration on the part of government is that government and all MDAs should fast-track the payment of arrears to ICT sector players for services already rendered. We have noted that this is a challenge that cuts across not just the broadcasting industry, but also the other subsectors in the sector, where most of them are crying that they are struggling due to the heavy debt of government. We also invite that the consideration of deferment of collection of taxes, like corporate taxation, that is being considered for the others, is also extended to the members of this sector. Consideration that we have noted in other countries of reduction, also temporary reduction of exercise duty and VAT on services such as data, and from the current 12% and 18%. We have seen this being done in other countries, and we hope this can be considered in Uganda. Again, we also invite government to consider zero-rating taxes on ICT devices. We know this has become our song, but we continue to hope and pray that government listens to our cry. Madam Chair, you raised the issue of affordability of the rates, and I would just like to share with members that if we improve and increase the usage of the data services, we have a bigger mass on whom the cost of provision of those services is shared. So this helps us bring down the cost of those services. So that is one of the reasons why we really advocate all the measures that can increase the usage of these ICT services, especially the broadband services, so that we are able to realize lower rates in the country. Government should also consider financing of broadcasters' initiatives that are geared towards promoting adoption of ICTs to improve their service delivery. I mentioned earlier that it is a global observation that reliance on advertising may no longer be sufficient. So many of them are looking at how they can adopt ICTs to bring down their costs, but also be able to move in the new normal with new business models. So we invite government to consider the inclusion of the broadcasters in the financing that has been proposed under UDB and UDC. In conclusion, Madam Chair, of the presentation that had been prepared, the communications sector has played a central role in ensuring the business continuity of business activities and that the public remains informed. We call on government to support interventions to grow the digital economy and continue to recognize the importance we have of why we continue to need ICTs and communication services as a whole. We note a number of quick wins, and we call also on government to especially pay attention to the government-owned operators like UBC, Uganda Post Limited, and Uganda Telecom Limited, so as to position them to harness the opportunities of the that have emerged out of COVID. Madam Chair, I'll just take a minute to comment on the presentation that has been made by NAB. As we have mentioned, we advocate the payment of arrears by government agencies and departments to all the communication operators. Cost of internet, as I have mentioned, we need to grow the size of the market. OTT is something that has already been presented to the Ministry of Finance for consideration, and discussions already are on way. License waivers, Madam Chair, we invite NAB to revisit this. I will be candid as to openly declare that we have different sets. There are those ones who have been in arrears for many years prior to COVID. So we do not think that COVID should be the excuse to grant the waivers. Consideration should all... Yes. We would be happy to list all those. And regarding the consideration of 3 years, I think we also need to take into cognizance of why these fees are paid. They are not paid just to have the permission to go, but they also go into the return of the services that are required by the broadcasters in protecting their rights and also monitoring their operations. So this will be impacted. We cannot have the other sectors only subsidize the broadcasters. It would not be fair to the rest of the sectors. UBC and Signet, I would really request that consideration is done, because we are all aware that UBC is already limping. So if the revenue that they require to keep their operations running is now also being looked at to be stopped, it would become a problem on how unless we're expecting that government is going to fully fund this, and again, we are aware, all of us, about the challenges to this. It is important for us to take note that this is in respect of the television operators, that this Signet is being referred to, and I could share that already even they have been required to expand their network. So without funding, this would pose a challenge to them. in terms of the other requests we are making, we also need to take note that it's a cyclic effect. We are asking government, provide this, provide this, provide that. And we're saying, government, waive this, waive that, waive this. And we're saying, government, stop depending on donor support. So where is government to get the resources that will provide the services? So as we consider the different proposals, we also need to be cognizant that there is need to make sure that the COFA is funded. And Madam Chair, you put it well, that there are emergent needs that had not been anticipated. So whereas we may look at the savings that are there today, where did all the funding for the emergent needs come from? We need to take this into consideration. Madam Chair, with that I submit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irene, once again for that very good presentation. But I want to start off with a serious, a selfish concern. The quality of network and access to the network in some parts of the country. My political career in Nakaseke stand at challenge because of the poor low rate of access, and even in those areas where is this access, the quality. I give the case of my district, Nakaseke district. Government is now operating on e-governance, and it's supposed to be in real time. But quite often, there is no network, and they suffer. Sometimes they even fail to fulfill the mandatory requirements, and they end up being finalized, especially when it comes to financial issues. And my people in the rural area, especially the cattle corridors, have a lot of business to consult, but there is no access. There's no access. I don't know whether you don't have the whip or a way to convince the providers to cover the whole country. Because it's no longer a luxury, it's now a necessity to all parts of the country. Because in fact, COVID has made it even has made the demand even higher. Because if you have a case down there, how do you communicate when you are not on mobile phone? So I think you need to find a way to get your operators somehow to cover all the areas of this country. You've talked about innovations. I'm happy you are in line with the people you regulate. They're also talking about innovations, but you haven't come up with concrete ideas where you want to see these innovations. There is now e-agriculture. People are getting on agriculture inputs, and they're selling their commodities on the internet. And this is very important for us for a market. Because, for instance, in my area now, the matoke is rotting in the garden. We have no market, not because really there is no demand, but because the intersection, the connection between the buyer and the seller is not there. It will be difficult for a matoke trader to hire a truck and drive it all the way to deep down in Nakaseke without being sure that there is enough matoke, and without being sure of the price, so that when he's negotiating with the truck driver, he knows in advance whether he's going to make a profit or a loss. So I think you need to come up with more innovation, and I'm sure this is an area which you can comfortably promote, especially in agriculture. If you are looking for stimuli, agricultural marketing is very, very important. We have the e-voucher system, which has started in some parts of this country, but cannot be rolled out throughout the whole country because of lack of connectivity. Otherwise, I thank you very much, and I would like to invite my colleagues. But those colleagues who have not introduced yourselves, because do so as you present yourself, you make your presentation. Honorable Kabafunga, please.
Thanks, I want to thank the group of National Association for Broadcasters for their presentation and for coming to Parliament, and also applaud her, the Acting Executive Director. Madam Chairperson, maybe I don't know if it was intentional, but the presentation of the engineer came last, so we couldn't too much refer, but maybe we internalize it.
No, she's the regulator.
Yeah.
The operators had to come in first.
What I mean, handing it over to us so that we follow, yeah. So it affected us a bit. I think next time you present it. Madam Chairperson, maybe starting with her. It was a nice presentation, but it was more political than technical. I would expect such a representative to be presented by Kabafunzachi, not her, because she was not technical enough to tell her, you know, I prefer figures when you are presenting to really appreciate the problem. And secondly, I'm just summarizing. You kept referring on global observations, like these countries do this, so we should do this. That can't suffice because we have different circumstances and we have different issues as a country. So you cannot just say because Herbert is doing it, I'm also doing it. And secondly, in your presentation, I don't know whether you have sat with these broadcasters, because I remember when I was in ICT committee, I want to agree with Chairperson, there were a lot of money we were discussing, considering to upgrade the internet and the website and everything in our local villages. And indeed, we discussed at length. But if I go to Ruchiga County, they are just there. They don't know what is happening. They just know COVID is there, but they don't know what to do. The social distancing is not there. So the broadcasting you are talking about and they are talking about is just in town. But in the villages, no social distancing, no what. So I think there is a lot of work you need to do. And secondly, engineer, you forget that these tax bodies come here to present with reasons of why you pay taxpayers you earn and why you pay VAT. So you just don't say remove. You have to assert yourself. It's good you are aware that the OT tax is in finance, and yet from finance you come here in this committee. So you have to present your case, because also they present their cases. So it's not a mere saying that remove. I want also to also say that the zero rating, tax zero rating is not, it can't, because government works on taxes. Secondly, going back, Madam Chairperson, to my friends here, the group, the National Association of Broadcasters.
The Kalisa Group.
I don't know, those are your words. Here, the Kalisa Group. Basically, the same way they did not submit the figures. And I don't know whether they looked at the supplementary budget we passed to ICT. I don't know whether you discussed with them. Most of the things were discussed exhaustively, but it seems they are not aware. Some of the proposals come in that we want this. For example, they are proposing that government should inject some money, but they are not telling us what government should do. Some people came with the NSSF payments, some maybe, and they are aware where the problem is coming from. For example, from Central Bank, you mentioned it. So you must have come up in your discussions. What are they? Can they create treasury bills in Central Bank so that they mitigate these factors? What are you putting on table? Then you are complaining about electricity, but these guys have come many times to assert that for us, we are charging this because of this. And sometimes you don't have to unreason them because they are reasonable. Tature even came to Chankwanza and presented the whole paper. You remember? And convinced the caucus and the president that, look here, for us, we are making losses in the figures. So when you come from anywhere and say, remove electricity bills, it is not justifiable. Secondly, you talked about, in your presentation, you would have talked about the short-term and long-term interventions, because now you are saying remove, for example, banks should charge low rates. But remember, you can't attack a bank, because if central bank has not done anything, the bank cannot do anything. You have to inject money in the bank so that the central bank has to inject money in the bank so that the banks also reduce those rates. They can't. Some of them are closing. For example, Madam Chairperson, sorry to delay the discussion. I was telling one of my colleagues that if you want to see how bank collapses, just say remove loans. And you know very well, Parliament, we give them money because we have some loans. But if you tell them that also we want a 3-month exemption, they will collapse. Because now they are depending on us. They are not giving us loans. So it's government creates some treasury bills to put in. I don't want to go into details. But my basically analysis is, in a brief, it's a general discussion you are bringing in, like which you are no much difference from us politicians when we are looking for votes. But basically, I think when we are here, we should look at, if you are talking about specific projects like infrastructure, remember these projects have their loans. People came here, proposed their loans, we discussed them, we passed them in Parliament. So if you say, remove money from infrastructure and put in ours, it doesn't make sense because the loan is ongoing. And secondly, there are some specifications which we considered. So let's not be in heaven. Let's have real economy, as the president said. Madam Chairperson, I'm sorry I talked much, but I want also to kindly request you that I have another meeting. I may not be able to listen to the reactions. But since you are there, you will brief us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, but it would have been
Madam,
good
maybe I can respond just before he leaves. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Honorable Kawafunzachi, for your comments and concerns. First of all, Madam Chair, I wanted to make it very clear. As media, we don't want free money. We don't want handouts. We don't want government. We don't want actual media to capture that we came here to ask for money. What we are asking for is one, that as you come up with government projects to build roads, to intervene in the economy, to help these circles, to put money in UDB, put money to communicate to the citizens, to communicate what you are doing. So this money we are asking for, 2 to 5% of whatever project you come up. If you are going to build, you are going to put money in wealth creation, 100 billion, to help our farmers. We want you to put 2 to 5% of that money into these radios in Ruchiga to communicate to the Ruchiga people how they will benefit, to communicate to them the new normal. That's what we're asking for. So they will use that airtime, but they need to pay for it. That is the only intervention we're asking for, Madam Chair. So we are not asking for free money. No way. And I want you to capture it. We want government to plan and use resources they have and budget for media. That's all. I don't know if I'm clear.
Madam Chairperson, let me comment something. I'm sorry, maybe you didn't follow my presentation. let me make it more clear that I didn't say Karisa wants money.
Yes.
You get my point. And in my presentation, I didn't talk about media asking for money. But I thought you are in partnership to look for solutions as government.
That's what's important.
And what I'm trying to say is when you are putting something on the table, bring practical solutions. For example, I can tell you that government pays for airtime for leaders when we are in the constituency. Sometimes for district leaders, that's government intervention. If you didn't know, I can tell you that, I can give you figures. So my submission was, if you want government to say, let's live in infrastructure, divert this money. Bring in proposals. Bring in technical proposals. But I'm not saying that you want money. I know how to read. I didn't see anything here to show that you want money. But I saw something like you are trying to help government to get solutions to fight this economic pandemic. And I'm saying that we are not angels in parliament. We have 2 ears, we can listen and adapt your ideas. So I don't want to mistake everything as if I'm very articulate in what I'm saying.
Okay. I think as we are at crossroads, we need to find a meeting point. The journalists have put their concerns on the table, and the media houses have put their concerns on the table. And for us as government, we want to see from the problems and suggested solutions, are they working? And that's what is going to be contained in our final resolutions. Yeah. Otherwise, that is raising a very important point, and he's doing it with a lot of passion. Ruchiga is not connected, like Nakasebe. So you cannot expect him to, even if you talk the new normal, the new normal you are talking about, Nakasebe and Ruchiga cannot be part of it, because they are not part of the original normal. That's where he's coming from. Honorable Kajara, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To introduce myself, my name is Aston Kajara, Member of Parliament for Mwingi South. Chair, I must commend the National Association of Broadcasters and the members for the work they have done during this COVID time. Actually, they have done quite a lot to educate the masses, educate our people on the evils of COVID-19 and how people can protect themselves. Must also commend UCC for regulating the sector this well so far. Chair, on the submission by NAB, and they said that the money was budgeted, I think 6 billion. It went to different players, and they were able to tell us what they have so far done. Carried out massive awareness campaigns, carried out presidential addresses on COVID-19, broadcast live and covered Ministry of Health and so on. Compared to what they were given, they have not quantified what did this equal to. Was it really enough? Or you could have done better if money had been budgeted. Because this COVID-19 is about information. About information, how people can keep safe, how they can keep house, how they can keep distance. So they did not tell us of this money which was given to them quantitatively. Was this money enough, or what they did, was it commensurate to the budget that they were given? They were talking of offering free space and airtime for government communication. It is true, because a lot of airtime, they were compelled actually by government, although it is a business. Time and again, I think for the last 5 or 6, 10 years, the broadcasters have been forcefully told to air government programs without payment. And it is a business, and I think UCC is... Patriotism, no. In your shop, Madam Chair, people have shops, people have businesses. They have not been compelled to contribute to government. So I really I'm happy that these people have done quite a good job. But what are your views on some people who have concealed information about this COVID? We have countries that have concealed this information, and you are journalists, you are able to dig deep and see the effects. Countries like some of our neighbors have been
and they have their connections.
And you have their connections. Yeah. Why haven't you actually brought out this information? And they have affected us as a region. You are talking of a new normal. Many people don't know what your new normal is going to be, because it's just a word, new normal. What is new normal? And we're also hearing of new world order after COVID-19, 5G. You must bring that to us so that we know how to prepare ourselves of this new world order, the 5G. On the proposals to government on the economic stimulus, some of the proposals which you actually were giving, like capitalization of UDB, it's already done. We've passed money. We have passed money to Microfinance Support Center. We have passed money to UDB. If it's not yet there, it is in the process. So it's up to you. And it is not ring-fenced for particular players. If you have a part to play in the economy, I think this money can be accessed. My concern is your recommendation that we postpone new infrastructure projects. Really, COVID is I don't know how long it will take. It came, but if some of our infrastructure is still lacking in education, you have seen that, like in hospitals, like the health infrastructure is not enough to accommodate the happening such as this COVID. If it were to actually come en masse like it has happened in Europe, we are not able to cope with it because our infrastructure is completely lacking. So for you to, I can understand if it is electricity, but for roads, but for health infrastructure, education infrastructure, we actually need to re-engineer it so that we are prepared. If there is an incident like this one in the future, we are able to cope. I thank you.
Yeah, I would also like to comment on the postponement of infrastructure projects. You know, for us economists, we say that if you invest in the market when it is at lowest. You don't invest in the market when it is at peak.
And I think this is an opportunity to invest in some infrastructure projects. For instance, Kampala. Media people are affected by the high cost of transport in Kampala. And I'm sure you'll be one of those who would like to see improved transport within Kampala. If you say that you postpone infrastructure because you have got enough reasonable miles of tarmac roads, how about your Kampala, which is in a mess right now? Would you like the business to continue as it is? I saw City Council trying to invest in the old tax park, remodel it, and come up with new infrastructure projects.
Repair potholes.
Yes, repairing potholes. Should we postpone that when we don't even know when these effects of COVID are going to end? And secondly, many of the infrastructure being government is looking at right now have been occasioned because of the effects of COVID. If you look at your sector now, there is more demand for internet connections than before. I used to hear some years ago in Europe, people talking of the information age. We are late in reaching the information age, but now we are there. We are there. But do we have the infrastructure to carry us in the new information age? So really, I don't totally disagree with you, but there are those which we must take advantage of right now. If you don't organize Kampala now, will you organize it after the total lockdown, after the total lifting of the lockdown? Will it be possible? The answer is no. So I think let's strike a balance between the two. Yes, Honorable Veronica.
Thank you very much, Chair. My colleagues have exhausted the economy side, but I just want to make a comment on that side, that these people need, like Mr. Kalisa stated, they don't need money, but they need government to invest in those things that can help them, help government to air to give information at large and in country. So I really want to agree with him. The other one, I want to make a comment on what the good thing that COVID has done to this country. If more. Because
Honorable Katoto, can you come forward, please?
We would not be talking like this had COVID not put his face on around the water of Uganda. Now, it was the first time I saw that some incentive was put in the communication area to be able to, for example, our Ministry of ICT. Had COVID not come, I don't know how much that ministry would have benefited from, and so on and so forth. But I want to thank the information people, Uganda Communication Commission, and then the National Association of Broadcasters. I think it is also the first time they've come, or more, one of the many times they've come and put their hands together to make sure that Ugandans have information. It is only in this COVID that I saw everybody coming together, getting the president to communicate, getting the ministries, the task force, passing the leaflets, the international organizations. Everybody is on top of the work. My problem is the utilization. And that, I will start with the last paragraph of the executive director. The utilization. Because certain things were not put in place, now we find it very difficult to have everybody consume it. The examples that was given of Nakaseke, you can give it from Mwenge, Kaberamaido, Ruchiga. You know, we need to have certain things put in place for us to get these services nearer to the people. And I think this is one of the things that you jointly have to bring it up and work, like you said, you are actually fast-tracking. It may be a quick win now, but let's fast-track these things. And we would not be fighting, for example, with education. Some districts are not getting the benefits of what is being aired on television for our children. Others are not getting the benefits of the COVID messages, and so on and so forth. The next thing I wanted to talk about is also the appreciation. Uganda Communication Commission, please appreciate your innovators. These ICT people, boys and girls, have a lot of knowledge that this country would tap from. But what has happened? They've either gone frustrated and taken jobs as shopkeepers, shuttling between Dubai and what to bring telephones to sell and what have you, because they're not being appreciated, they're not being employed, they're not being attended to. You don't even hear, you don't even talk to them about their innovations, and it is all there for our consumptions. Others have left the country. Then the next one, Chair, that I wanted to talk about, it's a general comment, but I feel it is important. It is the rights of the people in this risky business. There are a lot of times they are not taken seriously. You find them fighting wars as they collect this information with police, with security people, and some of their...
They're picked from studios.
He's giving me information I don't need. Okay, their studios have been visited at night. We don't know what they take and that kind of thing. I mean, on this table, we really know what rights have been been violated, the abuses, and you all know what you go through. And really, you have to come up. I know you have an association that looks after your rights. Maybe through that association, try as much as possible toward. The only advice I would give is that as you go for these rights, also know where your responsibilities come in. Then finally, and this is to both UCC and the NAB, it is about what you may give us to consume. I'm talking about morals of what is aired out there. It's a general comment, but as a senior citizen, I'm not going to allow you leave this room without me talking about it. UCC, can you control what Ugandans consume? We have our culture, we have our religion. Don't just bring a tape from America, from new normal, and you force it on us. We don't want to consume those things. You are our children, you are our brothers, you are our sisters, and we don't want to consume. Please, it is so bad, and it has gone to other areas. I didn't want to talk about cyber crime, cyber problems. You get stalked when you shouldn't be and all that. But please, let's guard Uganda's morals. This is Uganda. It is not. And you can control this, UCC. Other countries have been able to control. You can't go and play about with this in Ethiopia. Not even in the neighbor Kenya, let alone Tanzania.
Did you see Trump? Did you see Trump?
Thank you very much. He has finished my whatever.
Madam Chair.
Yes, I think on the quality of your product, I would also like to add integrity of your staff.
Exactly.
Integrity of your staff. I will not say much because we are being captured here.
Today.
But when we have a close meeting, we will tell you about this. There is a lot deserving, Madam Chair, from your people. I'll give you a lot deserving from your people.
You know, the information is as good as its quality. Because if you give distorted information, because somebody has given you a handshake, it will not be information anymore. Let it be correct information. I don't know how much training you give to your to your people. It's good that your industry is one of the highest employing industries among the service industries, but the training, the quality, the skills of your people are really important. And I would like the regulator to take up this seriously. When you are licensing, I think you need to look into those kind of things to ensure that our reporting, the information we consume, is really up to the mark. Yes, I'll start off with
the Constitution. Free information for all.
Yeah, let it be free but credible. Nobody's denying information. We want credible information. Yes, Honorable Makuyu?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I also take this opportunity to thank NAB for the campaign. From I listened to small radio called Radio Maria. They don't engage with this type of work, but for this campaign, they are at the forefront. Now, quick one. First of all, let me talk about the coverage. Madam Chair, when you move to areas like Amudat and Buko, they normally use Kenya radio. There's nothing of Uganda. They find in their own, they use Kenya radios. I don't know. And the members of parliament from that region have been complaining why up to now, nothing. And there's this program of saying that should educate, learners should be taught over radios and what. Today now use Kenya radio, that is UCC. Number two, the proposals you have talked about, one, where you say we send money directly to people. Will this be sustainable? You know, government struggle to feed only 1.5 million people here in Kampala, but up to now, some people are still complaining. When you take a quick look, assuming government wants to give 20 million people, each one 10,000, it's 200 billion. 10,000, is it sustainable? So we have to see how to per household. So 10,000 per household, like me, I have 12 children. Like me, I have 12 children. What will I do now with the 10,000? 12. As of now.
Maybe as a campaign token.
As of now. As of now.
68%
yes.
of the households are vulnerable.
So when you talk about yes, we agree with the government to clear domestic areas. And Madam Chair recently also passed money, rapid credit facility from World Bank. Part of the money is to clear domestic areas. I think even the media group should also, you claim you have 15 billion policy. The money is now available to government.
But don't endanger finance, because the money they have is just a small percentage of the total domestic areas. The media people can't claim 100%.
No, they are talking about 15 billion only. 15 billion
but
here.
There are others who also have claims.
No, but they take the 15 billion because they are like 400.
Anyway, it's a member of the budget committee which is going to...
This money can be paid to one person, but you are paying for 400, which are employing many. I think logically, I think it can be paid to such people. Now, you've talked about the loss of business. But at times, have you looked at reducing the talk time, these charges you normally when, because now you have to revive business. Yes. Have you talked about lowering those rates? When you lower rates, then you encourage people also to come in. Yes, there's a proposal for OTT, but there's another tax we normally pay, this voice bundle. This one goes to who now? That's one, even if you pay OTT, but when you have not paid that one, you cannot access. Now for UCC, like Madam Chair remembers, remember when Kasita came here, they say government should declare this period a loss.
Force majeure.
Yeah, for everybody. Now why can't UCC apportion this loss and also this license? You say now it's a loss too. Because I saw you trying to defend it, say no, that they should pay the license. Now it's a loss to everybody. So we assume it's a loss. Now you apportion the loss and you say, instead of paying 100 million, 6 months, pay 50. Don't you think it can help to help these people also come out of this crisis? Otherwise, we thank you very much for the presentation and the proposals. Now, for commercial banks here, much as even if Bank of Uganda owes CBR up to 1%, will not help, commercial bank will not reduce the lending rates. Simply, Honorable Peter Sematimba puts his money there, I go and I borrow. Not the Bank of Uganda putting in this commercial bank. So whoever much they low up to 1, unless the Bank of Uganda injects some money into this bank, then it can loan. But short of that, I'm here in Uganda, I don't think it will not get that.
Yes, Honorable Peter Sematimba. You must declare, are you going to speak as a broadcaster or as a...
I am going to speak as...
I hope you don't have barriers because I've
as a Ugandan who is...
do you have license areas?
Oh, absolutely not.
Patrice Seke doesn't have.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the National Association of Broadcasters for their presentation and the Acting Executive Director, UCC, for your presentation. Both of them were very nice. And congratulations to you, and I hope that it's permanent. I'm sure you hope so too. It's a permanent, you get moved away from the acting status and become permanent. Now, Madam Chair, I just want to say a couple of things. Practical approach to moving this country forward. From the perspective of government, I think there's certain things we need to take into consideration seriously and find a way of making them happen. 5 weeks ago in Brazil, I remember everyone, WHO and so on, were talking to the president of Brazil about how he was handling the COVID situation, and at that time he had only 12,000 sick people and maybe 1,000 dead people. And he took it lightly. He took it lightly. The proper communication to the masses was not done. And 5 weeks later, they have almost 600,000 sick people and 50,000 recorded dead people, not counting the unrecorded ones. What's happened to Brazil is pretty much what happened to America when not the right communication took place. And right now they have almost 110,000 people dead. And these are countries with richer and better systems than ours. Is what happened to Italy when they didn't take all this into consideration, but did not happen to Taiwan because they disseminated the right information at the right time, that in spite of having a border next to China, they only have about 10 people dead in this whole thing. So my point is, the fight against COVID, the main fight about COVID is communication. That is the main fight. Those that have communicated properly have beaten the thing. It's all about behavioral change. It's all about the right behavior. Now, efficient government, we need to understand that efficient and effective communication is all about reaching your target audience where they are listening or where they are reading. I'm raising this point because the 6 billion shillings that we as government put out there to communicate about COVID, out of the 6 billion shillings, we all know, by the way, that most Ugandans listen to private radio stations like yours, Madam Chair. They listen to the private ones, not UBC. And yet, this one government entity, which is not listened to by many people, actually which is probably the least listened to entity, got 2 billion shillings. And yet, the stations that are listened to, with whom we can effectively send the message, got only 4 million shillings each. Look at that, 2 billion for one and 4 million for the others. As government, are we being efficient? As government, are we reaching out effectively to our people? This is something we need to consider very, very seriously. Now, one of my colleagues, honorable colleagues, asked about the 4 million shillings and what NAB has been able to do. If the 4 million, if what was done was commensurate to the amount of money. I just want to give an example of what we need to consider as government in reality. There's this radio station called Super FM. This station decided to air ads free of charge, warning people about COVID, teaching them behavior, and so on and so forth. Now, people of Uganda, it apparently has it reaches about 100 kilometers diameter, radius. But the point is this: the 2 ads per hour cost 32 million shillings a month. 32 million shillings a month. So you can imagine when government says, okay, we're giving you 4 million. What is that to the information requirements that exist to save this country from COVID? So we need to consider that very seriously as government. I agree with most of the suggestions that NAD came up with, most of them, except I also disagree with the idea of holding back on infrastructure for the same reasons that you gave, Madam Chair, and the same reasons that Honorable Kajara gave. But also add this on that investing in infrastructure during hard times is one of the standard ways in which economies are rebuilt. Number one, the infrastructure is being improved, and there are definite benefits out of that, efficiency and so on and so forth. But number two, by investing in infrastructure, especially at a time like now where the economy has gone south, this is one way in which government, on top of building the infrastructure, is actually injecting cash and jobs into its economy, into its people. So that infrastructure thing must go on. However, to UCC, and I just wanted to agree with you, Madam Executive Director, that we need to build a market for data. However, we can't get away from the realities of economics. That if you want to attract someone to something, give yourself, you who wants to bring them in, create a loss leader, which will be an incentive for them to decide, oh, this looks attractive, I'll get involved. And then eventually, once the culture of using data is inculcated, then you bring the price up. So we've got to look at this thing long term. Therefore, I disagree with you slightly on the issue of a reality, an economic reality that you think does not encourage that data costs be put down. If we want to grow, that's what they're doing in America. That's what they're doing everywhere else. In fact,
is going to international content distributors, and these seem not to be regulated by yourselves, and therefore the playing ground is not leveled between NAB members and these international content distributors, yet the treatment elsewhere is different. Why is this? Because this is a complaint directed. Why do we allow that situation, yet we realize the importance of NAB members in the fight against COVID? And I think, is it an issue of policy or it is an oversight? So I would want to hear more about that, if you so wish, and maybe about all the other inhibitors to growth in communication that NAB members raised, so that they are more efficient in carrying out this important mandate, supplying this public good, because communication is at the heart of fighting this COVID-19 pandemic. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Madam, all I heard have been said by other people, but what I want to emphasize is that these people need blood. What they call blood is money. There is no way you can do a down trickle effect in communication without having money. I emphasize that the areas should be paid as soon as possible. And if possible, where we see that they can do better, we go down and add in something, Madam Speaker. With communication, there is no way you can have the effect felt into the mass population without inserting in money. For example, Madam, I will tell you, as one honorable member said, for me in my village, people didn't know about even COVID. I had to go over the radio and TVs, even use the language they understand better.
You have TV there?
No, like radios. Even they see West, the TV West and UBC. And NBS. Those people who have dishes. So now,
I had to go there and even tell them in the real language they understand. People, COVID is there and it kills. If you don't die, you can face anything. I told them. So it's now how they started now distancing and avoiding buzz during the night. So, Madam Speaker, I was emphasizing the fact that government should come in and really take care of these people by inserting in more money. That's all what is needed. I thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will request, there is my OB who has died. I've just received a call, so I'm going to bury in Kayunga. I beg for your indulgence. Thank you.
Okay. Why don't you come forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam ED, the presentation from NAB. I'm Amos Mandela, Member of Parliament of Buyamba, Rakai District. I'm sorry I came late and I've not had an opportunity to capture what NAB presented, but at least I've heard the Executive Director, UCC. Madam Chair, like as I've said, I come from Rakai. Rakai is on the forefront of the high prevalence of COVID-19 because of the porous borders with Tanzania. And we have had now enough time to listen to radios and following the e-education, e-health. Most of our children have been attending radios. But we have one very big challenge, Madam Executive Director. And this is actually the time when awareness creation has been required. But the challenge, like one of my colleagues said, is the foreign waves, the waves from Tanzania. At a time when people are eagerly waiting, you not have the updates, our pupils learning from the radios, we get waves from Tanzania radios in Swahili. I don't know what mechanism do you use to intercept and actually protect these waves from Tanzania that interrupt our listening to our radios. And it is very unfortunate that in Rakai, like other areas, it is still virgin, we don't have any radio. What mechanism do you use to intercept such waves? And what can you do to help us, at least, to have our own broadcasters from the area, the community radios, so that people can concentrate other than being interrupted by the Tanzania radios in Swahili. Thank you so much.
Amos, that's an opportunity for you. Exactly. To start a community radio. It's not so hard. But she will respond. But on the interference from the neighborhood, one time I was in Easting, and depending on which side you look, when you are making the call, it will either be Rwanda, or Tanzania, or Uganda. I don't know how you can hate against those cross-border on the in the border areas of our country.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Azai Vedoro Sensiza Kavalesa, woman MP Kamonge District, member of this committee. I want to first of all thank UCC and NAB for the work you are doing for this country to make sure that we join our heads and our hands together to fight the pandemic. And we also want to thank you that you are part of the developing country as AMU number 4, because without you, we cannot disseminate the information to our local people to benefit. We want to thank you very much for that. But my question goes to UCC first. In this era of pandemic, we have so many adverts by, can I say Uganda Telecom something? The MTN, the UTL, the whatever, in terms of mobile money. We are having a challenge as a country whereby some of these telecommunication companies announce themselves that they are going to reduce on the deduction of sending money on mobile money, but instead they are still charging the same, and yet it would be very paramount for our local people. If you are to save someone, we are in the era of saving our brothers and sisters who are far away and they are not economically empowered. We want to save them. But whenever you are sending the money, however little it is being charged either on send or withdraw. Can we be helped so that we can see how we can fight this pandemic together on this? Then another thing to you, CC, I want to request you to help this country, the natives of this country, is that sometimes you find someone is sending money and the money is sent by just one figure, it becomes an error. And the local person doesn't know how to call to the customer care immediately to make sure that money is retrieved back to his or her line. That money is being taken by our telecom companies in this country. So how are we going to put there some measures to make sure that money is being collected? And then even I would be very grateful to hear that UCC have collected that money from telecom companies and it has donated it to the National Task Force to fight against the pandemic. Because there is a lot of money. There are those ones that are sent on lines that are not functioning, but the money is sent on that line. That money is not being retrieved and it is not being given to any person to utilize it. But all those monies are within our telecom companies. How are you going to help us to make sure that that money is put to good use? It would be helping the task force to fight against the pandemic that is prevailing in our country. Then lastly,
been declared for tax purposes.
Yes.
Because that is windfall.
Yes.
It's extra income.
Yes.
It should be taxed.
Yes. Then another thing I want you to help us, the NAB. You see, we are having a challenge, as Honorable Katoto was saying. They called members of parliament to view to have maybe a message sent to their respective districts and constituencies in the local language to be broadcasted on UBC. The government was given money for that. But for me, as I was in the village, I was seeing the time some of this information was being broadcasted. Our people are villagers. They are in the gardens. Someone is bringing the information of a member of parliament in Kamwenge. When our people at around midday, our people are still seriously in gardens. No one is watching it. No one is listening to it. And then the UBC was getting money out of that one. Come, we record you at parliament. We send the information. It is free. And some of us were paying to our local radios, giving out money, because our people are listening to our local radios other than listening to UBC. It is true that it is our radio. The government has to empower it. But also timing is very important. If you are giving out information to our local people, you need to time when they are there to listen and even watch. So if you start broadcasting such information during the midday, at lunchtime, at whatever, when the people are just seriously in their gardens, then to whom are you sending the message to? Then lastly, I just wanted to ask for the publication of these pictures and the information that was given out. All of it is written in English, as if all Ugandans are reading and writing English. In my area, I have never seen any whatever media information, these pictures that were given out, that in our local language. So whom were you sending that information to? When in the actual sense, we still know that in our local areas, people just read and write the local languages. Why did you make it uniform, like the way how this education materials was sent in one national language, which is English? But if we were to fight against the coronavirus, people would be interested to read these pictures. They are interested in pictorial information. The Africans don't normally read a lot. But what the picture is there, but the words should be in the local languages. How do you
connect with the Department of Languages at Makerere to make sure that at least in our regions, that information was given in our local languages. I thank you.
Yeah, I think she's right. Information to be effective, it has to be targeted. And timing is important. That's why you charge premiums for premium time. So I think what she's saying is very important when you're addressing the rural people. Chairperson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to say, I've only interfaced with other committees. I've never interfaced with the National Economic Committee, the ICT Committee, and others. I think you have great brains here. And thank you for the insights that you have given us. They will not changing the way we do our businesses. Madam Chair, I will just give some highlights, and then my colleagues come to supplement. Honorable Kachara mentioned the 6 billion that you gave us to do COVID work, the intervention that Parliament appropriated to broadcasters. It is true we requested for 15 billion per month for 3 months. We made that request to the task force headed by the Prime Minister. The Minister of Finance was in that committee. They listened to us and they said, okay, we'll go to Parliament and ask for money. What we saw on the budget was 10 billion. They came to Parliament, you cut it to 6 billion. That 6 billion was again given to UBC and the Communication Task Force. The Communication Task Force took 1 billion, UBC took 2 billion. So the 400 media houses, all these radios in your villages, in your places, they got so little, and even we hear that some of them missed out on the list. So, and this, they said, we are giving you this little money, go and communicate for 3 months. April, May, June. So, was it enough, as asked by Honorable Kajara? No. But we had to do what we had to do, because remember from January, we were doing pro bono work. We had to do it because this is Uganda. And most of these radios, whenever the president comes, maybe we've even formed a show for him, we call it After 8. Whenever he comes to communicate, all radios across the country, they hook into our televisions and pick the signal and communicate to those people. Whether the people down there understand, that's another matter. But we believe radio stations, again, they get the president's communication and try to translate it to those local communities. They have done a great job. Let me tell you, without communication, the way Honorable Sematimba said, there's no way we would be praising ourselves the way people are praising ourselves. Okay, the health workers have done great. The leaders have done great. But without media, so how will you communicate a curfew? That there is a curfew tonight, so and so shouldn't move at this time. So they have done a great job. Now we are saying, moving forward, the 3 billion was never enough. Can we use government, as you communicate other government interventions, put a line for communication? So that as you communicate that you are giving new seedlings, you are giving money in circles, there's money in UDB, you ask UDB as you pass that loan, we want to see the line for communicating this for our people. Otherwise, they will get it. It's only the few that will know about it, and money will remain here in Kampala. The other point, Madam Chair, the issue of our neighbors, it is true, as media we are concerned, that some of our neighbors, they might not be communicating what they are supposed to be communicating. And we've seen with this COVID-related information, it goes with the media freedoms. The higher or the more media freedoms you have, the more you'll have more information about COVID. The more tight you are, the more you'll not have the right information. And without mentioning any country in our neighborhood, you focus on them and see. Uganda, Kenya, where media freedoms are up there, You can see we communicate what is on ground, and we are very emphatic and upfront. I don't want to mention the other countries, but we've tried to do links with those countries. The journalists there have said, we can't talk. We can't. No, I've just mentioned Uganda and Kenya. Those in terms of media freedoms. and as chairman now, that's how I see media freedoms. Yeah, Kenya relatively slightly better than us, but we are not bad off in terms of media freedoms. We get some chibokos sometimes with our security agencies, but we are managing. Yes. So we are concerned, and it's true we've tried to get some reporters from that side to communicate to us. They will tell you, I will talk about this generally, but I will not give you the right information. In terms of 5G, I think Engineer Edie will talk about 5G. I'm not well qualified to talk about it. Honorable Veronica, thank you very much for the compliments. It is true, as we communicate all these initiatives that government has put up, we need to communicate to the relevant people. We've taken your concerns on the issue of utilization and the issues of rights. They do concern us, and would like Parliament. They did stand with us some time back, the Human Rights Committee of Parliament, on the issues to do with the rights of journalists and reporters. We want to thank you for those concerns, and we need to stand with Parliament. The way you provide oversight over government operations and projects, we also have an oversight role to make sure that the Ugandans get what they deserve. So we need to work together, media and Parliament, to provide the bigger and overall oversight over this country. It's very, very important that our people are protected as they do this. In terms of morals, I will ask Joseph to talk about morals, but I know UCC. They will talk about it. It is true some of our people are not living to the standards that we expect them. But also we do have concerns, Madam Chair, that some of your people here in Parliament facilitate our people as if we don't pay them. We do give them transport to come to work.
They ask for it.
We don't.
Otherwise, they don't cover you.
Okay, if they ask and you don't respond. Now we've had.
But it's not all.
Now we've had. Yes. So I hear, because I'm not very old in the media industry. I'm only 12 years old. So I asked one of our senior editor in the newsroom, who has been there for 30 years, starting with UBC and others, former UTV. I asked, where did this envelope thing come up? They call it envelope, they call it amateur, they call it so many things. They have baptized it so many names. So she told us, while they were at UTV then, government never had money for coverage. So they had a circular saying that UTV will send a reporter, but we need to facilitate there. It was like a standard procedure. So it started there. That's what that senior editor told me. It started there. It has grown into these mainstream media that you must give them an envelope to cover you. Let me make it very clear, Madam Chairperson. Whether you give that person money or not, that person will not determine how your views will be aired on these platforms, because they have a stronger gatekeeping mechanism with stronger producers and editors that will say this is rubbish, or this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense. So you don't need to facilitate anyone, because these people are paid salaries and they are paid transport to come and work. So please, and there is a bigger problem here at Parliament, and it is also big outside there with the private sector. They think if a reporter comes to cover your event, you must facilitate them. It's a bad culture, it's a bad habit, and we must fight it together. I will talk to my fellow colleagues that we need to fight it. We need to fight this bad habit. So the moral bit, the ethics, we understand it. It's something that, it's a cancer that we need to fight together. The integrity issues and many of these. Honorable Amakuyo said in Amdat they have issues to do with coverage. They receive Kenyan signals in their country, in their part of the region. I think this is something UCC might want to comment on, because they give licenses and frequencies to cover this whole country. And from reports that we get from UCC is that actually Uganda is maybe 90-something covered by radio signals. So it's something that they need to take up. And if they need investors to invest in radios in that region, we are here. We'll come and invest in those regions if UCC can give us licenses and frequencies to come and invest in those areas. Domestic areas, thank you very much, Honorable MPs, for that support. We need the 15 billion paid to these media houses because, again, they will support the other parts of the economy that need to be supported in communicating in the new normal.
You didn't cover that in your news, so that's the one on Thursday.
We covered it.
Did you?
We covered it. These media houses cover Parliament as a priority. The first 3 stories, it's about Parliament. It's as if the other people don't exist. They cover Parliament with impunity, let me say it. These people you see here. Now, in terms of reduced rate card, yes, we have reduced our rate cards to survive. But let me tell you, Madam Edie did talk about evidence, figures with evidence. Now take it from me as chairman of media that our revenues have reduced up to 60%. I don't know, you don't see Coca-Cola, Airtel cut its budget by 70%, and many others. The top 20 advertisers cut their budgets. I mean, you have Honorable Peter Sematimba here. He will tell you they cut all their budgets. And we don't know how long it will take because they don't know how the recovery looks like. So we had to reduce our rates and we had to survive. Honorable Peter Sematimba, thank you very much. I think you are a very good ambassador for the media in this house. And I pray that the people of Busiro so it's conflict of interest, but a good one.
You may not know that he's one of the veterans in the private broadcasting.
Yes, he is. He started all these things and he has brought so many innovations to the media industry. Thank you, our Vice Chairman Emeritus. Honorable Peter Sematimba used to be my vice chairman, Madam Chair, and a good one. So the right communication to the right target audience. Why Honorable Kabafunzachi said there is no social distancing in Ruchiga, I believe they listened to President Museveni's address and they stopped there. The local radios there, they don't break it down in Ruchiga for the people to understand. So, now imagine if a radio in Ruchiga is given money to communicate the circle money, how they can get access to seedlings, how the NADS give them money to, not free money, to publicize what they are doing. They will have enough money to employ more people to be able to communicate and break down what the president is communicating. So we just need. How can we run it efficiently? Did the revamp work? So those are the things I wanted to put here. But again, my colleagues might want to supplement and we see how to move. On the issue of fake news, Sarah, she represents online, she will talk about it. Okay. Then Moros and others, and then our Vice Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Let the Vice come in first.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the members. I just want to add one small thing on what the Chair up today shared about the new normal. There is a lot that has been going on. If you went to Grand Imperial Hotel, all these hotels, at a time like this, they were all full of conferences, seminars, and most of these were actually supported by it was government projects spending money on that. We have realized that the webinars that have been happening, that the conferences, that the education that has been happening on the media is effective. It's very important that now government sees a way of changing the way they communicate, where instead of having in a hall, say in Kamwenge, to do a conference for 20 people, decided to say, okay, let me go to Voice of Kamwenge and spend 100,000 or 200,000 and educate people. As of now, you call yes, a few leaders, 200 of them into a hall, spend 20 million, 30 million. If 10% of that was spent on Voice of Kamwenge, Voice of Kamwenge will remain viable. As of why you don't have them in Amudat and Rakai, parts of Rakai, is because it is not viable. The majority of us, and I believe some of you members who have stations, clearly, I don't know how much money you are making, but some of it is not viable. And the reason it is not viable is because government spending is mostly in communication, is in terms of conferences, seminars, and brochures. But you're writing these brochures and sending them to Kamwenge in English. Who is going to read them? Unless you also send people to read these things for these people. It's so difficult. So we need to be realistic of the new changes. Recently, we're trying to have a discussion with the Minister of ICT. And they were saying, how do we procure online? Because the standing rules are that they should buy media in a widely circulating newspaper. So, of course, how do you explain that soft power news is a widely circulating, it's not a newspaper, so they cannot procure it. And since the laws are made here, I think some parts of that can be amended to include online as one of those things. Because now when you say widely saturated newspaper, clearly it cannot exactly work. And that can actually be able to bring in some money.
Widely disseminated.
Yes. And then lastly, just to emphasize, always we get calls from UCC saying the president is talking at 2 p.m., please run. And some of these things are long. So you run for 4 hours. Those 4 hours you have left all advertising. For those 4 hours you're not running any other advertising. And this happens quite often. We love to do it because we need to do it. We cannot talk to people if they are dead. And I think we have been successful as a country because we have done it. But I don't know whether there is any other business where you say we have urgent business to do in health, so all petrol stations should issue fuel to all the cars for Ministry of Health. Or all hotels should provide food to medical workers because it is urgent. All these other businesses are being supported by government and government expenditure. So why are the radios collapsing and some areas not covered? Because essentially for us, we are being asked to provide these services for free. Yet the hotels that these people are sleeping in, the cars in which they are moving, the fuel that they are using in this health situation, they are being paid. For us, all we got was the 4-5 million per station for 3 months. And we have all these people, 10,000 of them to employ, because at your station, I'm very sure you employ not less than 10 people. So imagine there are 300 stations. Now, how many people at Next Media? How many people at New Vision? So we have seen Oromuri close, we have seen Etop close. These are important for our people. But they cannot be sustainable because we are not spending on them. Money is instead going to other places. It's very important we review the way government communicates so that we be alive to the reality now, which is the new normal. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Secretary General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the issue of the morals and standards of the content that we put out, it's a very touchy situation. It's a touchy issue. It's an issue that speaks to not just only the content we put out, but the whole process, the whole ecosystem. Media doesn't exist in a bubble. We exist in a society. We are a mirror of our society. One of the things that happens where you tend to have a few challenges with the standards of the content, it's either with the training of the people, it's with the caliber of the people we hire. Why are the two not happening? Because if you're running a budget and you're running a business, when things go bad, you suspend training fast. But that doesn't justify the substandard quality we put out. We are working as a National Association of Broadcasters to work on training and empowering our people. We are getting into partnerships, one of them with our regulator UCC, another one with the African Center for Media Excellence, and we are trying to see how we can partner with the universities that train the communicators to see how we can raise the standards of our journalists, to make sure we don't offer society. So we shouldn't make money at the expense of killing our culture. We don't support that as media. So in the circumstances where you find the costs, you are hard pressed and you can't afford to produce local content which you monitor everything, then you are forced to buy international content which is cheap on the offer. I mean, you get it, they pass a few things and all that, but it doesn't fit into our morals, our standards, doesn't respect our culture. So as the industry, what we are looking at is we are looking at being economically viable so that we are able to produce 100% our content. We have great content, we have many creative people, we have lots of talent out there. If you've been to the theater, if you've been to the music industry, talent is there. But do we have the financial capacity to support it? At the moment, not all media houses can do that. So that's why we are coming here, looking at how the government can channel money, can communicate. We're not asking for free money. When you communicate, the money comes to us, also as an arm of the economy. When it comes in, then we are able to recruit class people to give you content that respects our values and culture. Thank you very much.
So the problem is the regulate to solve.
It's a bigger structure.
It's a whole ecosystem. It's not just the regulator.
But of course, plus the councils have here. People don't take employment seriously. It's Kwegayaza. Yes, Asana.
Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members. Just before I go to the media, with your permission, Vice Chair, when we were preparing our proposal, we were aware that His Excellency the President would address us, which happened last evening. And as you can see, since we are the vanguards of society, we publish, report in public interest. Many of our proposals are cross-cutting. And we are here in many feats. Many of these proposals were also presented by the Private Sector Foundation, deferral of payment of taxes, and we were happy that they were agreed to, and His Excellency the President unveiled them last evening, especially on creation of a facility to rescue businesses unable to meet their costs of operation because of the lockdown and several other issues. Now, turning to the media, I head the Public Relations Association of Uganda, and these distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the heads of communications and PR in several brands, MTN, Airtel, Vivo Energy, several others from government, whenever organizations are cutting budgets, the first budgets to get cut are those of PR, because there has been a misunderstanding of PR in Uganda as CEOs, honorable members of parliament, appearing in a headline. But there is skill and thought that goes into these things. You must create relations with your publics, with your stakeholders, everlasting relationships. If you focus so much on appearing in headlines, a small crisis then unsettles you. So it is true that budgets for PR and communications have been cut, and it's these heads of communications that decide on how much goes to the media. So, but I have a leg in the media as well. I run Soft Power News, www.softpower.ug, which was started in 2017. And we have won many awards in promoting Uganda's tourism, Uganda's national collective interests, without a coin. It is thanks to NAB and to the leadership of our chairman that for the first time in 3 years, we got an advert from the Ministry of ICT, for which we shall be paid a few million shillings, like my colleagues have pointed out, for 3 months. But running a news site has costs to it. You must pay hosting fees of this site. The more space you occupy, the more money you have to pay to your hosts. If you must run as a credible news outlet, you must pay your staff, you must pay the reporters very well, you must take care of their transport. And now, one honorable member asked, we are all talking the new normal. But what is this new normal? The new normal is that we are all now trying to cut costs by working remotely. And when you work remotely, it means that you're going to use more data than you actually needed pre-COVID. And now, the cost of data is very high, so costs for us are still going to remain very high. Now, also, statistics by UCC, and the executive director of UCC has been very kind to share these again. The latest are that in Uganda, we have over 6.9 million smartphones. We have over 17 million phones, internet-enabled, although they may not be smartphones. What this means is that Ugandans are increasingly becoming journalists, what we call citizen journalism. So in other words, if I am on Facebook, I'm not a member of NAB, I am not a member of any organized journalist association, I can post anything. So much of what is referred to as fake news, and we too have been victims. I have seen many of these citizens on Facebook, on Twitter, actually sharing fake news, even about brands in media, about NBS TV, and you find the chairman of NBS or NBS issuing a correction and saying that's not from me. So this means, therefore, that the idea that government should always have a component in government budgets to communicate with official channels, such as those represented here, cannot be overemphasized. On morals, recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, a video was shared from CCTV, I think by the Uganda Police Force, and a lady was drowning somewhere near Nakawa. You could see quite clearly that while she was fighting for her life, there was the first car on the first row, the second car, and I think the third. It is the car, a driver of the last vehicle, who ran to the rescue of this lady. His friend also, I think they were also in the same car, ran to the rescue, of the lady. Unfortunately, it was late. Their efforts were commendable, but they were not able to rescue the life of this lady. What does that speak about our society? Many times, I get to know about accidents from social media. And social media is not run by media, by registered media. Any Ugandan can open a Facebook account, can open a WhatsApp group and add all of us. So what you see is a Ugandan says, an accident has just happened on Kaberamaido Road. And they're actually recording. So that time you spend recording an accident, watching lives go, watching thugs take their money purses, why wouldn't you say, let me rescue lives, go back and take this about 30 kilometers to the hospital and save the lives? What this means is that our values generally as a society have gone down. So are we able now to use some of these good models like those two gentlemen who tried to save that lady who drowned in Nakawa to reconstruct our society? Now, how would you do this? By ensuring that you are working in partnership with official media such as we represent here. Today, we are all talking COVID-19, and yes, this is our challenge. But it is also true now that Ugandans have become complacent. In fact, that is going to be a bigger challenge, that the successes in COVID have led us to say, after all, Ugandans are not dying. We are surviving. We have, I think the latest number of recoveries as of yesterday is 82. So the fear we had at the beginning is disappearing. When you go downtown, you see so many people with masks, but they are not on. We are not.
The majority, by the way.
The majority.
Yesterday I went downtown, and you could count the few who had on masks.
Mm-hmm.
And just to give you information, 2 weeks ago I met a lady who apparently looked enlightened at the bank. We both arrived a bit late. The bank was almost closing. We tried to bargain, but the askari didn't allow us in. So she lost her temper and started quarreling. He said this so-called COVID is not there. He said it is just facing us to make money. To make money. If it is there, why are the people dying? In America and Italy, people are dying where it is. I also lost my cool and started answering her back. Because I got irritated because well dressed. And the branch of the bank where we are, she looked like she was either from Muyenga or Bunga or Ziga. She was not from those ordinary places. But she was saying that this thing is bad. Why are people dying? So the complacency she's talking about is going to be a secondary problem of the COVID success.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And therefore, because of those several challenges we are about to face, we all are aware. I think I've heard the Minister of Health and His Excellency the President say that why they locked the country down was to limit the outbreak and prepare better. That therefore, if cases were to increase, we are going to see our health infrastructure, our health workers strained, and we may start seeing some death. So this we must communicate very clearly. The messaging must be very clearly, and therefore partnership with media cannot be ignored. Also, Madam Chairperson and honorable members, I've seen several of you, Madam Chairperson, you've been in leadership for quite some time, and you have been a voice for so many social ills. You will recall that a report by the Uganda Police Force has informed the country that cases of violence are increasing.
at family level. So beyond the response to COVID, beyond us sharing updates about COVID, there are issues we must communicate. But, Madam Chairperson, it takes two to tango. There are times when we have approached government spokespersons. I'm not talking about the government spokesperson, but PROs, and they don't have the permission to speak. One refers you to another, and now this gives room to speculation. The other issue about the brown envelope, Madam Chairperson, it takes two to tango. I mean, if you're willing to give and the receiver is willing to receive, it becomes very difficult for us to control. But we are partnering with other organizations, and ACME has been very kind to reach out to several us to say we send our journalists for continuous professional development. And there is also a challenge. A cabinet meeting has just happened. It's a Monday. And before a statement is made, some sites have information quoting anonymous sources, a person who spoke on condition of anonymity. Now, for us in online, a scoop of news is very important to you. You're the first to have this information, and so you will have more traffic. Your site will grow. So now, but what happens if this information by an honorable minister who is saying he's speaking on condition of anonymity is wrong? Then you mislead the entire country. So I think in this, we are in it together. Again, on values and society, I think it goes back to our education. I was in school with Irene Kagwa in Namagunga. We had a special class on etiquette, social graces, and at one point, each of us were officials in social graces. So there are things, you know, you must live by, things you must not do. So each one of us in government, private sector, we must sit down and say, are we leaving our children to be brought up by television sets? And COVID has presented an opportunity for families now to stay together, children to keep with their parents for some time. I submit, Madam Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Irene, it's now your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the honorable members. I've always mentioned at UCC we value feedback, and I'm always grateful for such an opportunity where we get first-hand feedback to inform us in terms of how we need to improve our services.
The first issue that was put to us was in regard to quality of service and coverage. Indeed, we desire that everybody will have good quality of service. And as we say that we are bringing communication to all, this will only be possible with coverage of services. Before we have had, we've fallen short or felt we were a bit short because of some of the tools we've had, but with the regulations that are before Parliament, which we seek your support in passing or realizing, we will be able to take more action on the operators towards quality of service. Coverage is also an objective of the sector, and which has also been adopted by the government as a national objective. For voice services, yes, we still have many parts of our country not covered. In terms of where we would say we have good, strong signal, we're at 72% of the country, but as you see, that leaves out a big chunk of our country. Yet now we're talking broadband. So as an organization, we're seeking, and it won't be government alone, so we are using a multi-pronged approach to realize this objective of increasing the penetration of these services so that we bring the benefits of the ICTs to more of that population. Innovation, indeed, I'm a strong...
Sorry to interfere on that.
Yes.
I remember there was a fund sometime
yes.
on rural communication. Does it still exist, and is it being utilized?
Yes, Madam Chair, I was going to speak to that as well. The Rural Communications Development Fund which is administered by Uganda Communications Commission, is a gap intervention. So it seeks to address the gap between the market and the demand. However, in terms of what we need, and I will also speak to that, in terms of what we need to address, the funds that are available are still minimal. So we are doing an incremental expansion. A big chunk of the coverage we have today is an effect of the Rural Communications Development Fund. And recently we even had an upgrade of 22 sites by MTN to be able to get 3G.
On that issue of the fund, you remember the chairperson one time, Minister of Finance, because we had the sort of request that for that. But at one point I remember, I think the Minister of Finance wanted to take up some money.
They did.
But now when you're saying it's too much, because it was, is it 1% or 2% of what they contribute the other communications to that fund? It was a lot of money, that's why finance come in want to take. Because when we passed it was specifically meant to address that. So when we say there's no money,
it's insufficient.
What happened? Because we know it's a lot of money, unless finance took the money.
Yes, Honorable. Under the law, it is 2% of the levy. However, 1% goes to the consolidated fund, and of the 1% that's left, only 0.5 is used by the fund. But when you look at the capital needs of the capital expenditure required, because the fund is not only addressing the infrastructure, due to Honorable Peter talked about the various issues that need to be done. So we have issues such as the computer labs that have been done. So we have demand-side interventions and supply-side interventions that need to be done to be able to bring and improve that utilization of ICTs. So that's why we say the fund as it is not sufficient on its own, especially now that...
Would you be comfortable if we recommended to the Minister of Finance to reduce the portion going to the consolidated fund?
That
I know in other sectors there are interventions like that. For instance, under the rural, under the Electricity Act, there is a levy on the tariff. And the money which comes off that levy, I think it's about 2% of the tariff. The whole of it goes into the rural electrification fund.
That would be very welcome, Madam
Because
Chair.
now that COVID has woken us on the importance of universal coverage, and of course we are talking of days of democracy, we need to democratize the penetration so that all the Ugandans get access.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, honorable members. Regarding the innovation, indeed, innovation is something else that must be addressed if we are to achieve ICT development in the country. We need to move away from looking at other people from abroad to come and solve our problem, because we best understand our challenges. So we need to empower our innovators to be able to come up with local solutions to our local challenges. And as UCC, this is something that we recognize as key. And within the sector, there is the National ICT Initiative Support Program under the Ministry of ICT, a fund that was set aside to support innovators, specifically in that context. In terms of performance, indeed, we were challenged. We provided in our submission only data with respect to telecom, because as I mentioned, that was a challenge in respect of the broadcasters, and I hope our broadcasters are appreciating why we always need to make sure information is available so that we make informed decision that is evidence-based rather than based on hearsay. Infrastructure, I won't say labor on that because I think the honorable members have emphasized why we cannot afford to ignore or stop infrastructure development. Regarding morals, I'm glad Sarah has spoken to it. As a commission, we're being tasked, what have we done? We have set in place content standards on different issues, and some of the issues that are being spoken to are addressed in those standards. But we noticed a gap between the standards and the practice. So that is why we have partnered with NAB to address the training and actually train journalists to understand what does the law say, what are the standards, why have they been set that way, what are we trying to achieve, so that we improve their awareness and compliance with this. And again, as Sarah spoke to, we need to change the culture. We have this acceptability that we have put in place where it's acceptable practice, that is the norm, that is how they are. But we are the ones building the culture, and for as long as we keep accepting that culture, especially now with social media, you tell someone off, that is not acceptable. When you're in a group, don't allow people who are thinking it is funny to send false information. We need to break that culture, and again, I'll speak to the issue of false information more. Regarding UCC considering this as a loss, I was speaking to the proposal that looked at 3 years. I think as we all had the proposals from HE, there is a shorter period being looked at in terms of a grace period. And some of these are the considerations that we said we're already looking at, but 3 years is not something we are able to accommodate. Our COVID messages, indeed, they were strenuous. As already pointed out, we appreciate the broadcasters. When we approached them initially, they all pointed out this was national solidarity, because what affects the public affects them, but I guess they got overwhelmed with how long COVID ended up going for. However, we pray that this is only a one-off rather than the normal, because their obligation currently stands at 1 hour per week of government-free airtime and an obligation to portray the presidential addresses. We are working with the Ministry of ICT to set guidelines on what should be constituted in the 1 hour free airtime, having listened to the broadcasters and appreciated the challenges they have put forward. And we hope that, again, further engagement on this will address that issue of the government free airtime. Honorable Peter, as I mentioned earlier, he spoke about data usage. Yes, it's not going to be about tell people just to use it. As a commission, we've recognized that we need multiple prong approach. We need to make people aware, because as I always point out, for a bicycle, you put it there and someone gets curious and uses it. For ICTs, you leave the phone there and I'll be scared because I think I'm going to destroy it. So we need to have interventions that raise the awareness of people, farmers. Honorable Chairperson was talking about agriculture. We're trying to see, we've had a training specifically for farmers to help them appreciate the value of ICTs, how ICTs can help them improve that communication. The other parts of the sector have also come up with a portal to facilitate that access between the buyer and the seller, again to improve the relevance, the local relevance of these ICTs. Because for as long as, before we used to we talk about social media, but if I don't have anyone I know on social media, then am I going to use social media? We need to make sure we domesticate these services to make them locally relevant. And then that will help us drive, again, more usage. We've talked about coverage. Of course, if I'm not covered, I can't use the services, and the cost of doing business in Uganda. So from the operator, we also need to address what are those input issues that affect their cost of doing business, because then they're going to pass it on. As a commission, we are looking, for example, in the rural areas, that the masts are a key asset that the operators require, yet the rental costs of that is so expensive. So we're working with the tower companies to see how do we adopt cheaper facilities and also help them reduce that cost so that ultimately the cost to the operator and to the final consumer is reduced.
Madam Chair, can I just ask for a clarification?
Okay.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make that clarification myself. That vis-a-vis data, my main point of focus was making a cost conducive and attractive. I think the public is already aware of the need for social media, the usage of data platforms, and so on. The public is already aware of that. And even if they needed to be, remember radio was the main, we were the guys that made texting possible. We have also educated people how to text, but I think the market is already beyond that. The issue is price of data. And that's what I'd like you and the telecom companies to address, more than anything else. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable. And we'll come back to you in terms of what we see, because the way we see it, it's a package. We need to address so many facets to be able to bring that cost ultimately without having, we don't want a situation where the telcos now will be the ones to come back to say, you forced us to subsidize and provide services below cost, and now we need assistance. So we have to address the bigger picture. But from where we sit, we see a need for a uniformity, a joined hands, a joining of hands for everybody to appreciate now this is what we need to do. As Honorable Madam Chair, you pointed out, we are playing a catch-up game. We need to leapfrog, and all of us recognize that this is an asset, this is no longer a luxury that all of us need to support, and COVID has already forced us that way to appreciate these services. Misinformation, that is a nightmare for all of us. We do not appreciate what is happening. At least with the broadcasters, we have attempted to get them to appreciate and have their staff move to this. But on the social platforms or the online platforms, this is worse because it comes from all over the place. Some of it is not generated in Uganda. So a technology solution by itself is not sufficient. As Sarah said, we need to build also the online culture. We need to be able to tell that when you're putting a phone in a child's hand, take the extra time to sensitize them about acceptable use of such. What is acceptable culture? What should you do and not do online? You have people today who are portraying their whole lives online, which is not good even for those people, because deep down the road, they'll be the victims of those habits. So even as we address this issue of misinformation, where people think it is humorous to just generate a false tweet, and they think they're being funny about it, we need to actually be able to come out right, social responsibility, and say, you know, what you just posted is not right. And we keep calling on people, let us stop, think, and check. As UCC, we've put a fact checker in place to facilitate people to check and reference is something correct before you forward. No one has a gun to your head that whatever you receive, you have to forward it to the next person. If we kill that culture, or at least minimize it, we'll be able to address misinformation before we even deal with the technology. Of course, we look to the media, and again, with all of you here, we call to the media. The public trusts the media. And when the media speaks, if they actually carry the truth, the public will believe it. But if they also propagate this false information, then they are doing us an injustice. The treatment of NAB in comparison to the foreign entities like Google, YouTube, Facebook, this has actually been our global cry. All of us, and I speak with my peers, this is something we have been pushing the revenue authorities to look into in terms of taxation of online transactions because of the advertising they do. We note, however, that they are now waking up and realizing the world is going to gang up against them, and now they're reaching out to offer, negotiate how they can actually contribute back. But the reality is the advertisers want where there's viewership. And as more people go online, the advertisers are following where the people are going. So we are not going to be able to stop and tell people don't advertise online, because that will be only counterproductive on our side. We need to see how do we leverage our people to also make sure that they are not left behind or disadvantaged. And for most of the broadcasters, they're already doing online platforms as alternatives of their issues. There was also the question or concern expressed about waves flowing over from other jurisdictions. Now, the unfortunate reality about those radio frequencies, they don't know borders. They just move out. So when they start propagating in a direction, they just continue moving until they lose energy or stop becoming strong enough. So when someone constructs close to the border, you find that frequency is going, that signal is going to be carried over. And at certain times of the day, it will even become stronger than others because of the atmospheric conditions. Now, what we are doing is liaising with our neighbors. You mentioned the interference. That is one of the issues we try to prevent, and why we end up with people coming to us and we tell them we've run out of frequencies. Because we have to create spaces in between two consecutive radio stations. And the same has to be applied when we are considering our colleagues across the border, because we use the same frequencies. So we have to coordinate with them and know, if you're using that frequency, I can't use it on this side of the border. Now, what we end up finding is, of course, people keep trying to go online illegally and violate those technical provisions. And that is why we end up coming and seemingly hard on them and coordinating on the other side. But we appreciate that you've reported to us the problem in Rakai. We'll investigate it and liaise with our colleagues from Tanzania to ensure it is addressed.
You mean Amdat?
Amdat, yes, that was a problem. The challenge we had there, again, is a landscape issue. Because when we came to the area behind the mountains, many of the stations were then cut off. And you'd end up finding that the other people were taking advantage and constructing closer to the border. So it became an issue of, in the interim, as we find a solution, because we've been engaged with Kenya to be able to streamline an availability of a frequency for that area, we could not have those people completely cut off. But we are glad to report that we're in advanced stages of that. We think we may be able to solve that by the end of the year in terms of a frequency for that region that is behind the mountains. Promotions by the telcos, this is appreciated. I clarified earlier that the mobile money waiver was only when you're sending money to a person, another person on the same network. But we've noted that, of course, the operators were conveniently maybe not putting some details of the adverts. And this is something that we have taken up as a commission to make sure that advertising is as clear as possible to the public so that people make informed decisions. Erroneous dispatch, this is very similar to what we have with banks. And the key challenge is normally that they have to prove one that you have said. So that is why the system is such that you report immediately you've dispatched. Once the other party, if there was another party that you had sent to erroneously, when they remove that money, the operator is no longer able to retrieve it from you. Because what people do is, as soon as they realize there is erroneous money on their phone, they withdraw it. So you have to then engage them to be able to bring it back. But in most cases, people have gone to police and managed to get them back. In the case of the operators, if you send to, the process was changed such that it keeps prompting you, are you sending to a mobile user? Is this the person you're trying to send to? That process was to, again, reduce those issues of erroneous sending of messages. And when you send, typically, if the other person had, for example, before we used to have the code, if the person didn't withdraw, it's supposed to have come back to you. But we've noticed that this is a process that we have to continuously keep hearing the feedback and experience and keep improving, and we've taken that feedback back. We'll carry it back to the operators and engage them accordingly. In terms of media information in local languages, yes, this was a challenge, and I will take the opportunity to thank the members of Parliament. I know many were approached and did accept by the Minister of ICT and had very productive recordings that speak to the people. And this was really an appreciation that the people know who their leaders are and they want to hear from their leaders. The communication up this side was seeming distant from the actual persons. So there was need to come down and bring that message to the community from the people they recognize and trust. And we also used to get a translation of the president's speech, but in text form, provided by the ministry, again to facilitate the broadcasters in the challenge they were having. Again, this is why, as a commission, we decided to give temporary authorization in this period to the Bizindalo. Because again, we're looking at that community touch, getting it at the community level so that you don't speak that very complex message that you're giving at a country level. You come down to the community you're addressing and speak to them in their local context. Madam Chair, indeed, there are all these technologies coming up. You asked about 5G. Yes, 5G is only one of the new technologies that are coming up. And as a country, we have to prepare ourselves so that we are not left behind. As I said, it is best we leapfrog rather than continuously play catch up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Acting ED, UCC. And in the same vein, I would like to thank the NAP team. Okay. Okay,
thank you, Madam Chair. Just I wouldn't want to speak after my regulator has spoken, but I wanted just